Okay, we're back with setup number 3, and this is the Coleman Extreme. So we're going to take the same workup we had with the water, and we're going to apply that to a mock brew. So remember, our example for working up the water, we're doing a 10-gallon, 20-pound batch. So we've got our strike water and our sparge water elsewhere, but right now we're worried about our strike water. And we figured that with a 20-pound batch, and using the ratio of 1.75 quarts per pound, if you extrapolate that data out, you're going to need 35 quarts, liters, or 9.2 gallons of water. So we've got that heating right now. Propane is a popular option in North America. This is my propane burner. Haven't used it in years, and I'll tell you why in a bit. But you can see here, space isn't generally an issue for us in Montana. We've got plenty of it. So I've kind of went with a horizontal approach to the brewing here. But you do have to create steps, and by steps I mean gravity. And by gravity I mean something that works every time, all the time. I'm a big fan of it. So our first step is heating the strike water above the turkey burner. You can get these anywhere. Propane fittings everywhere. Propane is readily available, no problem. Of course you want to make sure you have a full propane tank. So we're heating that up. I know on my system, it is the summertime now, we want to mash at 152. We're making that pale ale, that 20-pound pale ale. So we want to mash at 152. Of course, we need to strike a little bit higher because we're going to lose temperature to the mash tun. We're going to lose temperature to the grain. On my system, if I want a 152 mash, and it's the summertime, I know I have to strike 10 degrees Fahrenheit hot on a 1.75 mash ratio. Of course, in the wintertime, my mash tun's a little bit cooler, my grains are a little bit cooler, I lose more temperature to the air. So in the wintertime, I might strike 13 degrees Fahrenheit hot. But my goal, no matter how I get there, is to get these grains in here at 152. Some people like to do a preheat where they'll take a quart or they'll take a liter and they'll heat it up, they'll boil it up, they'll add it in here 15 minutes before they mash. And that's fine too. It equilibrizes the temperature, and if you choose to do that, always do it. If you don't, never do it. It's one way to eliminate variables. So we're leading up to doughing in or mashing in, and there's something I'd like to mention about the gravity thing. No pumps, and that's great. That's by design. There are a couple ways that you can create these shelves. For here you see I've used a deck to create basically 3 levels. I've used the back of trucks. Truck tailgates are good. Basically, you just want to make sure that the level that is following the first level is underneath. So that way it allows A, either water, or B, wort to flow. And I'll explain just how to do that right now. So open up our mash tun. If you've preheated, great. If you haven't, that's fine too. And we're going to assume this is 162F because that's what I do. And some guys add half the grain first, half the water, the other half of the grain, the other half of the water, and stir. You can do thirds, thirds, thirds. You just want to keep it kind of short because if you're not short with it, if you're not fast, you're losing temperature to the atmosphere, and we want to be consistent. So however you do it, just do it that way every time. You've got your stir spoon here, you're stirring. Doesn't have to be vigorous. You just want to make sure that all of your grains are wet. And there are 2 ways to bale. I mentioned in the equipments list, just your stock pan, stainless steel. This handle might get a little hot, so you might want to wear a glove or something with a rubber handle rather. But I've found that as far as strength goes, as far as comfort goes, anything in about a 3-quart range is pretty good for everybody. And so there are a couple ways you can do it. You've got your 9.2 gallons at 162F. You've thrown maybe half your grains in here already. You can bale here. It only takes 5 or 6 times. Or you can start a siphon safely. Put the whole hose in there with your high temperature hose. Put your thumb over it. Put it in here and let it go. 2 ways to go about it. The baling's super easy. I highly recommend that. So you're baling, you're adding grain, you're stirring. When it gets light enough, just pick it up and pour the rest of it in. At that time, after you're stirring, everything should be completely wet. It might take you 5-7 minutes when you first get going. After a while, it should be a 3 or 4 minute endeavor. So you've stirred it, everything's wet. You take your temperature reading. Note your temperature reading. So, if we, on our first mash, if we hit anywhere between 146 and 158, I would consider that a win. So say we miss our mash tun temperature. Say we got 148. we know we're 4 degrees low of our 152. Just record that in your Brewto, record that in your software. Don't go adjusting the water. Just next time, make a mental note. Instead of 10 degrees F hot for my strike water, I need to go 14 degrees. So these are these little adjustments that we'll learn from. We cover up the mash tun. We set our timer, and I'll see you in 60 minutes. In the last video, I finished by saying that I would see you in 60 minutes. Well, I kind of forgot about a check that we need to do mid-mash. So instead of 60, we're looking at 30. 30 minutes through the mash, take the lid off, take our spoon, stir it up, and by doing this, we're going to redistribute the temperature. Just make sure everything's kind of even. Take your thermometer, take a reading, see how much temperature you lost. Maybe you lost 2 degrees Fahrenheit. It's just kind of for your records. And you put the lid on, and you're going to take your boil kettle. You're going to move your boil kettle off the scene here. And you're going to bring your sparge water. Put your sparge water on your heat source there, turn it on. Now if you remember from our water workup, we had 9.2 gallons as our strike, or our mash water. How much did we have in our sparge? We had 6.2 gallons, so we're going to heat that up. We don't want to exceed 185 F. That is if you want to conduct a mash out. And a mash out brings the grain bed to 170 and stops enzymatic activity. Otherwise, just turn the flame on, see how far you get. If you only bring it up to 150, that's fine too. But we're heating that up while this is finishing the mash, and then we'll lauter into our pot as soon as we got this up to acceptable temperature. If you only put in room temperature water, you still have to heat it up on this side. So that's why we want to heat it up on this side. If we heat it up on this side while we're mashing, we save time in the long run. It's at this point, if one were to drink a beer, that I would recommend do so. All the heavy lifting is done, the hard calculations are figured out, and as the old saying goes, it takes beer to make beer. See you in 30 minutes. So you're ready to start your lauter now. You're ready to start your rinse. And this is completely optional. If you want to do a Vorlauf, as it's called, you can do that now. And the purpose of Vorlauf is to take the first runnings, which may or may not have husks in them, and then recycle them on top of the grain bed, because you don't want to boil a lot of husks where they can create tannins. In my system, the braided stainless steel hose, I don't have a problem with it, but in the event that you want to, I will show you how. So, I like to keep this on as it collects. It's another way that we keep heat in here. When we do reach a boil, you want to take this off to allow for evaporation. But for the purpose of demonstration, I'll take it off. So, we've got the sparge water there. I took it off the burner. We're at 180 F. I moved the burner down here. It's underneath this pot. And this pot is underneath the mash tun, which will allow gravity to take it in. So, I've got a zip tie around here. Take this off, and I'm going to collect about a quart or two until I see it run clear. And I've got water for the demonstration here. And it's going through the grain bed, and I'm collecting my liquid. After it's clear, I take off the Vorlauf pan, and I run it into my kettle. The process will probably take 30 to 40 minutes. When it gets to a slow trickle, just go ahead and close your valve here. We're going to recuperate it on the sparge, so it's no use waiting around to get every drop. You're going to get them eventually. So after you stop it, you close the valve. You'll take your Vorlauf liquid and pour it back into the mash tun. In the meantime, fire up your propane. As long as you have about a gallon in there, you can fire up your propane before then. Anything less, you're going to run the risk of burning your wort, and those are flavors you don't want to deal with. So 30 minutes, we're done. We're going to add our sparge water.